Welcome, everybody, into the Q Code podcast with your hosts, Danny, Travis, and Alan. And we are here. If you are watching us on YouTube, you'll notice that there is a theme about our episode today. If you can see, yeah, I got to move this way. Bruce Lee, except for Danny's just in an empty dojo.
It's because I'm getting prepared.
So yes, today we are going to be talking about Bruce Lee, and but we'll get into the specifics in a little bit. Our segue into that, though, is that we have a few questions because we are talking about Bruce Lee. We want to talk about just our lives and how martial arts or Bruce Lee or anything in pop culture, anything like that has influenced our lives and why we like it so much. Because, I mean, who doesn't like martial arts?
Like, for example, who in this group has taken, I mean, by group, I mean people on this podcast have taken some kind of martial arts lessons in their lives?
That would be me.
I would say me too.
So everyone has? Okay, so Trav, Mydell, how far did you get?
He got actually really far.
Yeah, almost to a black belt. Pretty close, not quite there.
It's like brown belt?
Brown belt, yep. So I was like a year shy of the black, which is why these are weapons in several countries.
How far did you get, Alan?
Wait, was it karate?
It was karate.
Karate. I got, I don't know, what's the first belt?
White?
White belt?
What's after white?
Yellow.
Gold. Or yellow.
Gold.
I think I got to
I think yellow.
I think I got to yellow. And I was like, it matches my Asianness, so I'm going to stay there.
That's why you chose the all-yellow Bruce Lee behind you?
Yep.
Trav Koku.
So I also got to yellow. However, I'm pretty sure I did it in record time because I only took about 2 months worth of classes in the cafeteria of an elementary school called the Hannah Holbrook Hooters.
I know the Hooters. I was a Hooter for 1 year.
You went to a place called Hooters?
No, it's an elementary school, and their mascot used to be a Hooter, as in an owl.
And they are no longer the Hooters because, as you can imagine, we ruin everything.
Well, I mean, they kind of had that. They kind of had that one coming. That one's really on them.
All I can tell you is just at the end of each class, I always had like food crumbs and like, because like we had to act like it was a real dojo, like we had to take off our shoes and socks and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but this is real gross.
Well, I got to blue belts.
Good for you guys.
That's good, Danny.
Well, it's good, but really the dojo that we went to, blue belt was the second belt.
They're like, we're just going to skip all the others.
Blue belt was the fourth. It was the fourth belt at mine. Four blue belt.
I should have just kept that last part to myself. I'm also weapons, yeah.
I will throw this out, and I know that you probably know, Danny. I don't think Alan knows, and it's too long of a story to really get into, but I'll just mention it. There was a time when I was super into being a ninja. Like, so much so that I went to Barnes & Noble and found a magazine where you could buy authentic ninja garb. And
is that what you had when we were in high school?
Yes. So I had like the whole ninja get up with the split-toed tabby boots. I had a utility belt with like those claw things that you put on your hands. So see, I thought you were supposed to like climb trees with them. I quickly found out that they're actually used to murder people. So
But you probably could climb a tree as well.
Trav murdered
You-
like
right.
countless trees trying to figure
Yeah.
this out.
See, I just had this idea that because we used to play night games as kids, we'd run around the neighborhood, and I just thought like I would have been the coolest night gamer because I'd have my whole ninja getup, and nobody would be able to find me because I'd be flying around trees all over the place.
But Trav, is that the ninja outfit you wore in the video you made with Steve?
It's
It is.
yes,
Where you
yes.
guys put it in reverse and it looked
Yeah.
like you're jumping up onto ledges?
Yep, it
Yep,
was that
that was the same
ninja
one.
outfit. Now, the whole story really goes that the first night that because Trav was there, he just didn't have any ninja garb. It was me and our buddy Josh Edwards, and we had our ninja outfits on. Trav came along for the ride. We had to get a ride from his sister because we couldn't drive yet, and we were going to go toilet paper somebody's house. So she had to make a stop at Target. We got real bored in the car and decided to jump out and just run around and be crazy. But she told us if you do get out of the car, you have to lock the door. So then as we're out there, all these teenagers, these high school kids come out, and of course they see two kids in ninja outfits. So this is like low-hanging fruit here. And they got in their cars and they chased us around the parking lot. I remember specifically that Trav somehow got in a cart and was rolling down the actual parking lot as I tried to chase after him. Didn't work out, but
So is
He
this a
got
different
so-
time than when Trav jumped and realized that there was like another level to this backyard?
Yeah, that was
Yes.
a different time. No, Trav got so close to my cart. He was like coming and he was like right there. And then they're like, run for your effing life, ninja boy. And he like panicked and ran away and just left me coasting down the parking lot in this car.
this is
with
gonna
no way
sound
out.
real. Yeah, this is gonna sound really bad. But you know, when they were chasing me with the car, I didn't want to die, and I thought to myself, what would they not try and murder? And so I thought, who else would be in this ninja outfit? Probably someone who's mentally challenged. So I started flailing my arms around and pretending that I was mentally challenged. Like I said, now that I'm an adult, I see my mistake. But they did not fall for it. And they almost hit me with the car. But
Either they
anyway.
fall for it or they
I think if they're trying to hit you with a car, they wouldn't have like made that calculation in their head. I don't think they would have suddenly been like, whoa, man, that dude is flailing his arms. He is obviously mentally challenged. We gotta back off.
I had to try something. I was going to get freaking run over. I was
will
rolling
say
out all the
what's-
stops.
What's eating Gilbert Grape?
Too many
Shenanigans.
times. Too many times. But
I
anyway.
did, I did want a ninja costume until that night. And then after that night, I was like, yeah, I'm good.
You didn't want to spend $150 on all the bells and whistles that I did.
No, I would have taken the boots though.
So did your friend Josh Edwards, did he also have a full-on ninja, like the
Yeah, he
fancy
did.
kind?
He
So he
did.
bought the fancy one with you?
Yep.
So, I mean, things when I was growing up, I'm sure that you guys all had big influences from too, but we've talked about this on a previous podcast. We talked about that Three Ninjas movies. Alan brought that up, and then it brought up a whole bunch of turmoil from childhood past. So we won't get into that today. If you want to learn more
Travis,
about
because
that.
they called him Tum Tum.
Who, Alan?
Yes.
Oh.
Because he was a little robust.
I was Rocky in our playtime Three Ninjas.
What? I was Rocky too. Steve
And
was
my
Colt.
sister was Colt, and Miles was Tum Tum, my little brother.
Yeah, Miles. Miles was the furthest thing from Tum Tum.
But another thing was like Mortal Kombat was like one of my favorite video games growing up. Speaking of, here's a question for either anybody who knows, if they know. So obviously Bruce Lee is who we're talking about today. Was Liu Kang on Mortal Kombat like created after Bruce Lee's likeness?
I'm gonna say yes because you're asking this question.
No, I have no idea. I just
Danny loves to lead questions, these leading questions where he knows the answer but wants to see if we do too.
He would always get contempt of court if he was an attorney.
Danny's half-naked child just running through the back there.
In his dojo? Then tell him the dojo's a place of respect.
Danny, you don't have to be embarrassed. We'll just call attention to it and move on.
I'm not embarrassed, but I'm just like...
He's just like, you can see him. It's like he was trying to hide his face, like of how pissed he was. He's like, shoot.
6 people are watching this on
I
YouTube.
missed it. Did you guys answer it though? So it was.
I don't know. I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's true. It kind of looks like it.
Yeah, not only the way he looks, but like the way that he was like, yeah. It's kind of like what Bruce Lee would do, right, in his movies.
I feel like, isn't it the guy that played him, though, in the Mortal Kombat movie, the same guy who played Bruce Lee in that movie?
Yep.
So that's probably where you're like, that might be part of it, that you're seeing the overlap there.
Maybe.
Same
like
character.
It's seeping in.
He played Liu Kang and Bruce Lee.
Check it out. Bruce Lee was one of the 2 main influences of Liu Kang's character.
Look at that.
See? I just put 2 and 2 together, like just sitting here. So that was
perfect
awesome.
segue, Dan Kuhn.
I know. So does anybody else have any martial arts stories or influence they'd like to share before we jump into our main topic?
No, but I guess we should probably talk about why we are talking about Bruce Lee. So if you have listened to I can't remember what episode it was, but we started one of our podcast episodes with some conspiracy theories that we'd like to know a little bit more about. And at the time, Trav Mydell was not with us on the podcast, but he drew the short stick and gets to start today. And he was going to talk about the conspiracy theory behind Bruce Lee's death.
For anybody who's wondering, the really complicated way in which we decided the order of these conspiracy theories, we each put a conspiracy theory into a group chat. Alan randomly numbered those conspiracy theories, and then I ran 1 through 4, and then I ran a random number generator 1 through 4.
I'm so glad you took the time.
I'm 100% sure no one was wondering how we came up with it.
How did you come up with that? How
did they really
randomly select between 4 people?
Pretty sure
I think Alan assigned Trav Mydell's conspiracy number 1 of 4. And when I ran the random number generator, 1 came up like 7 times in a row to start.
It was meant to be.
Because I was like, run. It's like 1. I'm like, okay, next. 1. I'm like, I already have 1. 1. I'm like, come on. So, yeah, it took 7 seconds to get past 1.
Thank you, Dan Kuhn.
We can move into our main topic now. Go ahead and start, you guys. I'm just going to make sure my naked son is okay, because I did feel bad about that. So I'll be right back. But continue.
Now his couch is in his dojo.
If you guys are just listening to us on, I would just suggest going to YouTube for the foreseeable future until we are back in our recording studio.
Alan's house.
Alan's garage. Back of his garage, actually. It's just so much better to watch. That's what she said.
Yeah.
Nobody up. I kind of set you guys up.
I'm sorry, I failed you.
Before we started, we talked about each other not interrupting each other when they're talking, and Danny has every single time I've talked.
I'm sorry, what? Can I talk over you now? First of all, I've done it only 7 or 8 times.
That's all the times I've talked.
All right,
All
we
right,
ready to dive in?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
let's do it.
Right. Okay, so I have put together for us a nice comprehensive look into Bruce Lee's life. And we're going to kind of talk, we're going to start with his life a little bit. We're going to do a really high level look at his life because his death is juicy. Lots to get into there.
So this is
okay.
more than one conspiracy. Like it's conspiracies.
Oh yeah, there's
throughout the
several.
Oh yes. There's quite a few. And as I told you guys in the group chat today, I went to some dark places on the internet to get details on some of these conspiracies. Places I don't want to go again. Okay. So, as you guys know, Bruce Lee was born the year of the dragon and the hour of the dragon, which is why he's known as
The dragon.
the dragon. Yep, good job, Trav.
Wait, what's the hour of the dragon?
I
Do
guess
they
it's like
just
between,
correspond the month with the hours? So like 11 would be like whatever November is.
I have no idea. I didn't get that much further into it. Honestly, that little piece of information came from a report card I wrote when I was in like 7th grade that I just happened to have still on Bruce Lee. And I pulled it up because this morning I was like, I wonder if I have any good facts inside that report that I wrote when I was in 7th grade that I still have. So I opened it up and read about that. And it was like, I was born in the year and hour of the dragon. And I was like, ah. Also, the report was written in first person for some reason, as if I was Bruce Lee. But anyway, so he was born in San Francisco, but that was only a coincidence. His mom was a dancer, I believe, and so they were touring, and they just happened to be in San Francisco in Chinatown where he was born. But he actually grew up in Hong Kong. So he was there until he came out to. Can you guess where he came in the States to live?
San Francisco.
Nope.
No.
Wait, can I make a guess?
Seattle.
Yep.
Hollywood.
Alan got it. Seattle.
Oh.
Home of those apples.
We have a big Chinatown. Okay.
It's home of the Cosmic Crisp apples.
Home of the Cosmic Crisp apples. As everybody knows, Seattle is known for the Cosmic Crisp apples. So he enrolled as a major in philosophy at the University of Washington, just down the street from where I live, basically. And eventually he got a job teaching the Wing Chun style of martial arts that he had learned in Hong Kong to his fellow students, which, as you know, consisted of a lot of white people, including his future wife, Linda Emery, who he married on my birthday in 1964. August 17th.
There's so many crossovers with you, Trav.
That birthday bit was also in the report that I wrote, and I remember that. I've remembered that fact ever since. Like every time it's my birthday, I'm like, today was the day Bruce Lee's anniversary is, which is a weird thing to think on your own birthday. But
so you guys both migrated to Seattle in your adult lives, and you got married on your birthday.
So then he eventually moved to California, though, where he opened 2 more schools down there in Oakland, Los Angeles. And he had 2 children, Brandon Lee in 1965 and Shannon Lee in 1969. And then he mostly gained his highest level of success in the States in his lifetime from the TV series The Green Hornet from 1966 to 1967. Okay, so
who was the main character in that? In the Green Hornet. I know he was Kato, but the actor of the Green Hornet.
Oh, the actor of the Green Hornet?
Seth
I don't know.
Rogen.
No, it's not Seth Rogen. No.
It's okay. Sure. I didn't know if it was somebody famous or.
It is somebody famous, but I wouldn't say they were famous.
So Bruce Lee came out of it as probably being the most famous actor out of that.
Oh, definitely. He was. Let's see, I've got it right here for you. Van Williams as the Green Hornet. So,
wait, do you know how he got the name Bruce? If he?
Yes, I do. Would you like?
Well, he was born in the States, wasn't he?
What?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't he born in the States?
Yeah, he was, but his name is not Bruce Lee. His given name is Lee John Fan. Or Lee Jun Fan, maybe. I'm not sure.
Lee Chun. Lee Chun Fan.
Is it Chun? Jun? Is that Chun? Or is that
Jun.
Lee Jun?
Chun?
What? I feel like you guys should know, and you're disappointing me right now.
It's still not even our country.
I know, but that's
Grab
kind
and
of
I had
close.
this talk the other day. I was just reminding him how many people in my life have called me Chinese, and how there was that angry kid in high school that would call me chink.
Well, that guy was a dick, but
Really bad. It was really bad, but when he told me that, I just couldn't stop laughing.
Okay, so how many of you guys have seen the Dragon, the Bruce Lee movie? I know you have, Trav.
Oh, yes.
I know
If you guys haven't, you guys make me sad.
Yeah,
Have you guys
I
seen it?
haven't, but after doing a little bit of just brief looking up of Bruce Lee last night, it made me actually want to watch that movie because
Yes.
I didn't realize that was basically his only American-made movie.
Well, no, you're thinking of Enter the Dragon. This is Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, which was made about him.
Oh, is it a documentary?
No, it's not a documentary. It's like, it's got the actor. This is like bringing us back around to
Liu
Mortal
Kang.
Kombat. Liu Kang. The guy who played Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat played Bruce Lee in this movie called Dragon, the Bruce Lee story.
Oh, okay.
It came out in like 93, I think. The reason I bring it up is because it's a really good movie, but it's like got its handful of inaccuracies, which have like led to a lot of people having an opinion about Bruce Lee's death. So we're going to get into that in just a second as to like how this movie sort of influenced the culture around Bruce Lee's death. But first, let's talk about how he died. He would move back to Hong Kong because of racism in America, similar to what Danny had to experience in school. And then,
Unfortunately, this was my home, so moving back home just kept me in the same place.
you're like, I'm going back to West Bountiful. Anyway, so he had moved back to Hong Kong and he had done a movie called The Big Boss in 1971, which was known as Fists of Fury here, which was like kind of his first big one that sort of set him off. And then he did The Chinese Connection, which was even bigger, though I believe it had poor reviews according to this article I read. But and then he began work on this third one called, what was the name of it? I can't remember the name of the third one, but he began work on this one, and then he got the opportunity to do the first like Hollywood Chinese-led movie, which was Enter the Dragon, which is the one, Danny, that you were looking at earlier. And that
This
was
one.
so he.
Is it the one behind me?
Oh yeah. I think that's the one. Yep. And so he was doing Enter the Dragon. He went and shot that, and then he came back to do this other one, which was let me see, what was the name? I can't remember the name of that one that he was coming back to do. It was like his last one. They never finished it. Well, they finished it, but not with him.
It's the one with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Is it Game of? I feel like it's got Game in the title.
Oh, is that the one where he like has to fight the different like levels of bad guys, basically?
Yeah.
Game of Death. Yes, Game of Death.
But he's only in like 10 or 15 minutes of it, but then the rest is like a double.
Yeah.
They have odd angles to like not necessarily show his face, and the only time they see his face is like a cardboard cutout in a mirror or something like that.
Yeah, they had shot they had shot like 40 minutes worth of content for it, which is all the end sequence. And so the movie, after he died, they finished it by using the body double, but they ended up with like 20 minutes maybe worth of like Bruce Lee time of him actually acting, and the rest is all body double stuff. And they actually like changed the plot, which one of the interesting things, we'll get into this a little bit more later, but they changed the plot to something that was similar to the conspiracy theory down the line with his son Brandon. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so before we get...
So when is this? Is this like the 70s or the 80s or?
70s. It's like 70, like 73, 74, I think.
He died in 73, right?
Let's see, I'll double check.
I think
no,
June
he
of
died.
73.
He died, let's see, 73. Yep, July of 73. So, okay. So I'm going to walk you through his death. We're going to take it kind of slow. Feel free to interrupt me if you want, but it's important to get the details out because like different things connect through to his to the conspiracies that kind of come from this. Okay.
So what that means, Danny, is don't interrupt him.
No, you can interrupt. You can interrupt.
Why did you just interrupt him to tell me not to interrupt him?
Because that's how I roll.
When Alan speaks, it's by interruption.
Yeah, I can stop this recording at any time.
Okay, so, Bruce Lee had arrived in Hong Kong to discuss his film that he was working on, which was The Game of Death, right? So he had started shooting it and had shot 40 minutes worth of content. Then he'd gone and shot Enter the Dragon for the Hollywood Theater, and now he'd come back and was going to wrap this up. And he was having dinner that night with actor George Lazenby, who is James Bond from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. He's I believe he's the only Bond with one movie. And it's like the longest Bond movie. It's a good one, but it's long. But anyway.
So why did he go visit Lazenby? Like, was he working on a project with him?
Yes. Okay, listen. Listen.
I thought you said I could interrupt at any time.
Only with questions that aren't going to be told in 2 seconds if you just not interrupt.
I can mute Danny's microphone if you would prefer.
No, I'm okay. I'm just kidding. So he was meeting with him for dinner that night because he was going to put George in a movie, Game of Death, with him. So George is going to play, like, I think his master or something like that. And like Bruce Lee was like, I guess, so worked up about it. He was so excited that he was like with his producer Raymond Chow and his acting friend whose name was Betty Ting Pei, who turns out to be, she was his mistress, which Dragon, the Bruce Lee story did not include detail. But,
so did
he
his
was like,
family know? Did his wife know?
well, she still denies it to this day that they were mistresses. So it's actually unclear. But Betty says that they did have a relationship, and generally everything they've heard from other people is that they did have a relationship, but his wife did not. He was just like soaking wet, and since he'd arrived in Hong Kong, he'd been complaining about a headache, and it like had worsened and worsened while he was there. So he told Betty Pei that before he was going to go to dinner.
Back up like 30 seconds because you finished on the recording.
Back up 30 seconds. You guys hear that, right?
His wife denies that there's mistresses.
I like how Danny snuck away, but he like tried to stay on the camera. He was like, okay,
this is what you get when you're in quarantine. You get kids. Although I just want to point out that my kids are asleep. So
yeah, mine are as well. But
point out my kids are not asleep.
Yeah.
Did you guys just hear a toilet flush?
I did.
I thought that.
I mean,
mistakes were made.
What else are they gonna do?
Okay, I'm gonna rewind back. Okay, so his wife denies that there was any kind of affair, but generally speaking, it was pretty well known that she was in one of his mistresses. So because he'd been acting out the scenes he was so excited to portray with George, he was like exhausted and he had this headache since arriving in Hong Kong. So he asked to take some medicine and so Betty gave him a painkiller called, I don't know how to pronounce this, Quagestic?
Sounds like me trying to pronounce something on the show. Welcome to the club.
Anyway, basically Quagestic or whatever contains a tranquilizer called metroprobate, which is supposed to help with pain, tension, anxiety. So he takes the medicine and he goes up to her bedroom to lay down, and they go to sleep. So he sleeps, and so Raymond Chow, who's now who's Bruce Lee's producer and partner in his company, is at dinner with George Lazenby, and he's calling Betty to be like, "Hey, where is Bruce?" And Betty tries to wake up Bruce, and she calls him. He's still asleep. She hangs up. She waits a little while. She goes and tries to wake him up again. Can't get him to wake up. She panics. She calls Raymond from at the restaurant, who comes tearing back over to the house. He gets into the house, goes into where Bruce Lee's at, tries to revive him, and realizes basically right away that Bruce Lee is dead. Okay. Now, what happened here is Raymond Chow knew that he had Enter the Dragon was coming out in just a couple of weeks, and he was like, if it comes out that Bruce is at his mistress's house where he died, it's going to be a huge scandal. So we have to basically fake this. So he calls his private doctor to come. His doctor comes, checks Lee over, tells him that Lee is dead, but does not officially declare him dead. Then Raymond calls a hospital to come and pick up Bruce, who they are still pretending is alive. They drive him to a hospital 40 minutes away, passing by a closer hospital where he is officially declared dead upon arrival at that hospital. Now, the reason they did that was so that they would move his body far enough away from Betty's house that it would not be known that he was at Betty's. He would have looked like he was at his house with his wife, which is what they told the public.
Wait, so this is the conspiracy theory, or is this?
No, this is all facts. We're going to get into the conspiracy in a minute. These are all the facts that we know. This all comes from Linda.
Okay.
This all comes from a book that recently came out by Matthew Pauly, who's a biography. It's called Bruce Lee: A Life. I haven't read it, but I've done enough research in the last day and a half 2 days to get a good idea of what it's about. And he's got from what I read, all the reviews, it's a pretty comprehensive and arguably the most accurate Bruce Lee memoir. But what should be noticed is like there are different variations on the story, obviously, to some degree, but for the most part, these seem to be the mutually agreed upon facts. Now, okay, so he's been declared dead at the hospital, and Chow decides to say that Bruce was found with his wife, collapsed with his wife, and was taken to the hospital where he died, right? Well, what happens is it takes like a whole 3 days for the public to figure out that's not true, and they find out that he was at Betty Ting's house, which really bleeds into the conspiracy we're going to talk about in just a minute. But on top of that, to make it one step further, is in China, cremation is the standard practice for the death of a loved one, but because burials are really expensive. So Bruce Lee's wife decides to take him home to Seattle to bury his body there, which he is buried here. But what happened was on the plane, the glass inside Lee's coffin became like loose and basically trapped all the humidity inside the coffin because like it wasn't pressurized on the plane, and it like dampened the coffin and like dampened Lee's suit. So he was like all wet, his body. And so when he landed in Seattle and they figured that out, they changed coffins and put his body into a new coffin, which when the press heard that went bananas that there was this whole conspiracy and they were moving his body around. And so it was all these different things that like added up that just left the whole thing with this like shade of mystery around it that like led to these conspiracies. And so Andre Morgan, who worked with Bruce Lee a lot, basically, this is a quote from him. He says, the stories were rampant. Stories about him dying from an overdose, dying from screwing too much, dying with an erection, dying from being hacked to death by young thugs, poisoned by his servant. There was one story that he wasn't even really dead. So like just in that first few months of his death, it was like you couldn't turn around without there being stories, particularly in China and Hong Kong, around how Bruce Lee died, which leads us to the theories. So now we're getting into the conspiracy theory part.
So two questions so far.
Okay, 2 questions. All right, go ahead.
One, how did the people figure out 3 days later that he did not actually die at home, that he died at Betty Ling Ting P? Is that her name?
Betty Ting Pei, yes.
Oh, Betty Ting Pei.
The answer to that question is I don't know. In all the articles I read, nobody ever gave a reason as to how they found out. So I have no idea. But so just several articles said 3 days later, but they figured it out somehow.
Okay. 2, I don't get, and maybe I'm just naive, but how come if his body was just like wet or whatever from the humidity, how does that translate into him dying with an erection?
Well, that doesn't necessarily connect to the erection. Andre Morgan was just saying that upon his death, it was just like there was so many different rumors, and so it wasn't just that his coffin was wet and therefore he had an erection. It was that his coffin was wet. They moved his body because he was poisoned, or because of this or that, or he was chopped up, or he wasn't really dead. It was just that between the coffin being moved and Raymond Chow, like basically faking all the information out of the gate, we were left with essentially a very unclear story that had a lot of holes in it, and that's
People
what opened up.
filled it in as they would, like how
As you would.
they wanted. Yeah.
Yes. And so, okay, so there was 3 ways that because there's like, honestly, there's probably about 9 different ways people think he died. And so I kind of booked them up into 3 different areas. So we have accidental, we have mythical, and we have murderous. Okay. So I'm going to do these kind of in chronological order to some degree, because as time has gone on, his death has sort of had different loops in which people have different opinions on it. So we're going to start with like murderous, because that's like kind of the first thing that was out of the bank. So because once it was out that he was dead in Betty Ting Pei's house, people started immediately thinking it was her fault. Like she was the first one that kind of suffered the blow. And it's very interesting because it's probably the most common murder theory is that she did it. So people have said that she poisoned him, that she was an assassin, that she was hiding things. And it was so passionate that people in Hong Kong were protesting around schools and campuses, carrying signs that said like Betty killed Bruce and she knows more than she's letting on, things like that. And that was all like fine. It was annoying, but it was fine. But what really kicked it off was a series of bomb threats around Hong Kong, that people would find these bomb like packages, these brown packages, and on them would say things written in like Chinese writing, like Betty Ting knows the cause of Bruce Lee's death, or revenge for Bruce Lee. And these were put across the city. And so as soon as that happened, the government was like, oh, we have to like intervene. Like we have to put a solve to this. So they started looking into how he died.
Concerned for her life?
They were concerned for her life, but they were honestly just concerned about the fact that these bombs were progressed. There was bombs around there. All the bombs turned out to be fakes, but just because there was bombs being left around, they were like, we can't have somebody blowing up a school or whatever because they're mad that Betty Ting potentially killed Bruce Lee. So we have to figure out how Bruce died, and we need to be able to give people a definitive answer so this will be over. Now,
I mean, that's just rational thinking, you know. You get upset about something. I demand to know the truth. If not, I will put a bomb near a school that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty madness.
Something a Joker would do.
Well, what's interesting is like in my research too, I couldn't figure out why anyone would think that Betty would have killed him. There was never a place that said, well, Betty would have killed him because she benefited in this way or that way. She wasn't his wife, so she doesn't get any money or any kind of
like no motive for her to kill him.
There's no motive. The only thing that came up that I could see anywhere was she did marry a member of the Triad a few years later. Now, the Triad, we'll talk about them really quickly because they're also considered. So in a book called...
Really quick, before you go past Betty, Betty was... she was an actress too, right?
Mm-hmm. So she was in...
Was she in movies with Bruce?
Yeah, she's in one. I think it was...
So that's how they knew each other, was from that movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's Betty. So the Triad. The Triad. So in a book called Unsettled Matters, The Life and Death of Bruce Lee, we have author Tom Bleecker, who is basically kind of suggesting that Bruce Lee's death was linked to organized crime. Now, the reason he thinks that is because the Triads in Hong Kong have like a pretty good ownership over films and the film industry. And they were basically telling Bruce Lee that he had to sign exclusive contracts with other people around the area to kind of keep the industry in China booming, right? They didn't want, the industry to go under because Bruce Lee was becoming so popular and it was now moving into U.S. films like Enter the Dragon, things like that were U.S. backed. And so the rumor is that they first tried to pressure Bruce Lee into it, and he said no, and then they later came back, and some say with the help of Raymond Chow, Bruce's producer, they actually poisoned him and or murdered him in some capacity. There's honestly not a whole lot to back this beyond just the fact that the triads would have potentially wanted Bruce Lee to stay in China. But like getting to Bruce, I mean, you know, you could, like you say, okay, well, it was Betty and he brought it, they did it through Betty, but it just, you know, I don't know, there's not a whole lot there to back it, but it is there. The movie Dragon the Bruce Lee story kind of has a light suggestion that he had been accused of dishonoring the ancient Chinese secrets by sharing them with foreigners. So that's another potential reason the triad could have been involved. So there are a few little areas that talk about why the triad could have been involved, but generally speaking, in my research, I can't find a really solid, they were there or they did this or anything that really proves that theory. But it is out there in one of the popular theories.
So the ancient Chinese secrets or whatever being martial arts, right?
Martial arts.
So
teaching it to
there
all
are
the white
no
kids.
martial arts studios in America in the 70s and 60s.
In the 60s, no, Bruce Lee kind of came in and was the first one to really start taking that to actually
The other day.
yeah, he gets challenged by this man named Wong Jack Man. This is another situation in which the movie was not accurate, because the only reason he fights Wong Jack Man is because a man named, what was the man's name? David Chin paid him to do that. And the reason David Chin paid him to fight was because Bruce Lee was giving a speech and was insulted traditional kung fu masters, calling them old tigers with no teeth who teach nonsense. And everybody got all upset. And then Bruce Lee, I know. And then everybody got all upset because he's insulting these old masters. And Bruce says, like, I would like to let everybody know that anytime my Chinatown brothers want to research my kung fu, they are welcome to find me at my school in Oakland. Basically threatening all of Chinatown to say, like, come on down and I'll show you. And so like David Chin was like so upset that he was like, I can't fight him, but I'm going to pay someone to do it. And so he paid this waiter, an aspiring kung fu teacher, Wong Jack Man, to go and fight him, which Bruce Lee ended up basically beating the dude like really badly.
So it wasn't in a secret underground dojo?
No,
with
it wasn't like
Like the one behind me?
with the three like masters of kung fu who apparently voice the rules of the ancient ways.
Nope. It actually, so it's interesting because the article, which was written by the man who wrote the Bruce Lee book that I was referencing earlier, Paulie, I can't remember his first name, but he said that Bruce overwhelmed Wong with his opening series of attacks, causing Wong to turn back and run. Bruce chased him around the room until Wong tripped and fell. Bruce jumped on him and rained down punches, forcing Chin to intervene and rescue Wong. So it's actually kind of like in the movie, it's like so epic, and in real life, you're like, ugh, he's beating on that poor man. It's like crying, basically.
Wait, wasn't Bruce Lee not really a master of kung fu or whatever? Like, wasn't he just like he had his own style? Or is that another rumor?
He did have his own style, yes. And his style was called, let's see if I have it written down. I believe I wrote down. He called it Gung Fu. Oh, no, that was the one he fought. Where was his style? His style was called Jet Kun Do. Jeet. I don't know to say Jet? I'm not sure. Jet Kun Do, but it's like the way of intercepting fist is what it means. So he did have a style.
Is that how Jet Li got his name?
Maybe, I don't know, probably not because it's spelled differently, but okay, so that was, so you've got Betty Ting Pei, you've got the triads, you've got Raymond Chow, who is like, and this one is like, this is the darkest corner of the internet for me, just for the most part, getting to this guy, because I had not seen him name even listed until I got to this like article on some random website. So take this all with a large grain of salt. But some conspiracy theorists, according to this website, believe that he may have orchestrated Bruce Lee's murder. Now, he co-owned Concord Production with Bruce Lee, but apparently their relationship was strained because apparently Bruce Lee had a really bad temper on set. And when he fled, leaving Game of Death behind to go film Enter the Dragon, that kind of stung on Raymond Chow as well. And basically Raymond, kind of like the triad, was nervous that Bruce was moving back towards Hollywood. Like he'd been there for Green Hornet, and then he'd come back to Hong Kong now, and kind of according to this article, Raymond thought he had him back, and now it's like Into the Dragon was making Bruce huge again in the U.S., and Bruce was going to end up going back to the U.S. and kind of leaving him behind. And so rather than letting Bruce go, that he orchestrated to kill him. The reason that people kind of suspect Chow is because, and we'll get into this theory in a little bit more later, is that Bruce actually collapsed on set once, and when Chow was formed, he didn't call an ambulance. That he brought on his own doctor, and they found that Lee's brain was swollen, which is the same symptoms he had when he died. But when he died, Chow again did not call an ambulance and instead called his own doctor. So people have this suspect that Chow realized with the first accident that Bruce Lee was capable of having this brain swelling, and instigated it with the second one. Beyond this one website and a couple other places where he was mentioned like this, I never really saw any reason for this. One article is like, well, he could still benefit because he could still release Game of Death using the 11 minutes of footage of Bruce Lee and filling it in. But it's like, in the end, filming one kind of half-baked movie does not seem to me to be the same cash cow that having Bruce Lee alive would be. So I just don't really buy this one that much, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't make any sense, because if he's so upset that Bruce Lee's going to leave him and go back to the United States, your solution is to kill him?
Yeah, it seems like an overreaction.
Well, I mean,
okay.
So was Bruce Lee bigger in China or in the U.S.?
Oh, way bigger in China. Way bigger in China.
Okay.
Yeah, huge in China.
How many movies is he in?
He's in 4: Big Boss, Chinese Connection, Into the Dragon, and then his little segment in Game of Death.
That's it? 4 movies?
I believe so, yeah.
He was only 32 when he died.
Yeah, he was fairly young when he died, and honestly, he spent a lot of time in TV and a lot of time teaching kung fu and doing other things. So he wasn't a big. It just took a while for him to really take off.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, like if you think about it, it wasn't probably till after his death that he became really popular here in the U.S.
Oh, definitely.
So
definitely. Okay, which brings us to the last murder death. The last possible murder. So this one I put at the end because it's sort of the most vague of all of them, in that there's not any one person that it's attributed to. It's how he died. So there's been lots of suggestions that Bruce Lee was actually killed by someone who used a technique known as dim mak. Do any of you guys know what that is? I didn't.
Is that the touch of death?
Touch of death, exactly. Yes, it's the touch of death, where basically you just come up and they explained it. I was like, I didn't understand how it works. And so the touch of death is not proven, but here's how they suggest it would work, okay? So in the normal body, you have pressure points, right? And, like an acupuncture, when you do acupuncture, they go in basically and they push in a certain spot that releases the blocked energy in that area. And that's like what gives you like relaxation and stress, right? The touch of death is the opposite. Basically, they touch you in a certain place and in a certain way that blocks that energy. But because it blocks it, it doesn't immediately kill you. It just eventually builds up and then kills you. So you could die days or weeks later from a supposed touch of death.
Maybe that's what Steve was trying to do when he flicked me in the nipple.
Because things I read said that it was like he got the dim mak, but it took weeks for him to succumb to the effects or something like that. So
yeah, and so most people said that he got into the reason they believe is that he apparently got into a fight with someone on set while he was shooting a one of his films a couple weeks before, and they got into an actual fight, and they think that person, whoever it is, and is not named, hit him, and then it took a while later for it to sit in. But I think with all the murder ones, I think the hardest thing to find with them is motive. But with Touch of Death, it's even one step harder because you don't even have anybody who you could say did it, right? And who would have done it. And so it's an interesting theory, but there's just not really any basis for it.
Well,
right?
From a scientific standpoint, there's no proof that there is actually a dim lock, right? A touch of death.
Yeah.
Because that would suck if you accidentally like bumped into a wall or something, and you're like, oh no.
Well, I think it
2 weeks from now, I'm dead.
Pretty precise. I don't know that bumping into a wall would necessarily do it, but maybe. But I think you could kind of tie the Touch of Death in with the triads potentially, of saying like, well, maybe that's how they did it. I read one article that said there was like ninjas in the rafters on one of his movies watching him, but it was such an obscure article that I didn't even really take it in consideration. But there maybe could have been. So you never know. Okay, so the second way, so murder was our first one. Our second one we want to talk about is kind of mythical, and these are like kind of your big conspiracies. So there's two potential components to them. There's one mythical way that people think he died, and that is like the Lee family curse. And there's a few reasons that they think this curse could have existed. First reason they think the curse existed is Bruce Lee, when he was born, his parents referred to him as Little Phoenix when he was a child, which is a girl's name in Chinese. And the reason they did that is before Bruce Lee was born, his parents had lost another son. And according to tradition, if you didn't refer to your new son by a male name, it would confuse the spirits who might steal their souls. And so by calling Bruce Lee Little Phoenix, the spirit who comes after male Lee children would have avoided him. So that's kind of the earliest reference of there being a Bruce Lee or a Lee family curse, right?
It actually is a theme throughout the movie.
It's very much a theme.
Dragon, a Bruce Lee story, because I think that's kind of the thing that they go with, just because it is so fantastical, like just this theory of some being that will go after them, because he even mentions in the beginning of the movie, he's like, we bring you here, we dress you in girls' clothes, we do this so he doesn't get you.
Good memory. Yeah. Like
wait, hold on. Clarify this. Okay. So if your parents call you a girl's name when you're a boy, that curses you because your spirit gets confused?
No.
It hides you from the curse.
It hides you from the spirit. It hides you from the curse.
So they're saying there was a curse before he was even born.
Yes, because his older brother had passed away before he was born. They believed that there was a evil spirit that was coming after the Lee family. And so to confuse him, they called Bruce Lee Little Phoenix. Now, what's most important about this to realize, it's not so much whether or not that's true, which I mean, obviously doesn't matters much. What's important about it is the fact that even like years before Bruce Lee even died, there was already in his family this vibe of a curse existing. This did not come at Bruce Lee's death. The curse existed before. Now, another reason that the people are concerned about the curse is because when Bruce Lee's father died, he was buried next to a child's grave. I'm assuming, it doesn't say, but I'm assuming it's the unborn son that they had, but it doesn't say. But supposedly, it's also bad luck in China to be buried next to a child that has died so young, especially if it's a male. And according to superstition, being buried next to a child, that could mean disaster for descendants of the family. So even Bruce Lee's brother, Robert Lee, has basically stepped forward and claimed that his family, the Lee family, is under a dark cloud. Now, as we're going to get into in a minute, there's actually not evidence, but this is one of the ones that has quite a bit going for it, one of the conspiracies. So basically, the idea that Bruce Lee's family's curse, as Trav mentioned, it first showed up in the 1993 released film Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. And in that dream, he's having dreams where he's being haunted by this, like, it's kind of like a samurai, right, Trav?
It looks like a giant, like statuesque samurai
Yeah.
type thing.
And what's interesting is that near the end of the movie, this demon like loses interest in Bruce and begins heading towards his son. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He's like, "No, Brandon, no, go away!" Like, and he's like, and so the idea was in the movie that this thing grew tired of Bruce Lee and went towards Brandon, and then Bruce Lee kind of sacrificed himself to the demon to save his son. Now, obviously, this is all in the movie and it's kind of fictional, but what happened that was kind of interesting was right before the movie came out, Bruce Lee's son, Brandon, died in mysterious circumstances. So you've probably heard.
The Crow was around 1993 then?
It was being filmed the exact same year. So just before Dragon came out, Brandon Lee died. Now, how Brandon Lee died is very interesting as well. And I don't know how much you guys know about this, but so he was filming The Crow, and earlier in the shoot, one of the prop guys went down to the local prop shop to buy items for production, during which time he bought live bullets. That is forbidden, of course. And so the prop master removed them and stored them in the trunk of his car because, of course, you would not want live bullets around blanks because they look identical and essentially you could accidentally kill somebody, right? So, but what happens is when you're firing a blank, it does have gunpowder in it. It's what causes it to fire, but what the tip is like cardboard and it won't actually shoot because it's just not strong enough. Just disintegrates, essentially, blows it out. But they were shooting a scene where a victim had to look down the barrel of a gun, right? Like this. And when they were filming the camera, they realized that you could tell that the gun wasn't loaded when he was pointing it down the camera. There's Danny sneaking off again.
I was gonna laugh if you just hear a bunch of like beating sounds.
It's like in a Christmas story. It's like, "What are you doing, Mom? What are you doing?"
No, I didn't do anything, Mom. Oh, who said it? Schwartz. Schwartz. Probably heard that word 100 times a day from my old man.
I feel like my kids are gonna be that way too, because when I'm like getting all frustrated, I'm like, okay, Danny's back. Okay, so
All right,
anyway.
you guys, just my wife is at work tonight and my kids are not cooperating.
No.
It's cool, man. It's cool. Okay, so when they're pointing on Bruce Lee, they're pointing the gun, on Brandon Lee, they're pointing the gun at the camera. They realized there was no bullet in it. You could see that. So they went out and got the live round and put it in the gun to give the illusion that the bullet was in there, right?
Knowing it was live.
Knowing it was live, no intent to shoot anybody, just to use it in the gun for that shot. Well, what happened was, and this is where things start to get kind of coincidental and kind of crazy, is the lead tip of that bullet got lodged in the barrel of the gun. They took the rounds out, but the lead tip got lodged in the barrel. Okay, the gun was put away, and 2 weeks later, they pulled that gun back out to use in the scene where Michael Massey's character, Funboy, shoots Brandon Lee when he walks into his apartment. Okay. The idea was that they would shoot and they would activate the squib, which is what the packet of blood that, bursts out to make it look like you have a gun, and Lee would fall to the ground. Okay. Brandon Lee walks in, Massey's pulls the trigger, Lee falls to the ground, everything goes exactly as planned. Then Lee doesn't get up. Now what had happened was that lead tip that had wedged into the gun, when the powder hit it, it basically turned that lead tip into a bullet, which shot out, poof, into Brandon Lee.
So they did have a blank in there, but that lead tip was still in there.
That lead tip that was wedged in there shot out like a bullet, okay? And
so the lead tip was from an actual bullet.
Was from an actual bullet they had used earlier in the shoot when they were shooting the down the camera barrel scene.
Okay.
But it was like honestly, the prop guy probably should have checked the barrel, should have checked the round to see if there was anything wedged in there, but just didn't, because that's just super unlikely, and there shouldn't have been live rounds in there anyway, but it's just this whole series of coincidences, right? Well, Brandon is rushed to the hospital. He lives for like, I think 13 hours and then passes away in the hospital. Okay. Now, this is where people start really digging into conspiracy theories, because you have Bruce Lee, who died right around the same age that Brandon Lee died. They're not exactly the same, but they're very close. They're both the firstborn males of their family. And then the movie that Bruce Lee was shooting, Game of Death, that he filmed, they changed the ending of it to try and account for Bruce Lee not being there. And the ending they changed to was that he was an actor who was having somebody try to shoot him with a prop gun in the end of his movie.
Right.
So basically, the way that Brandon Lee died is the same way that Bruce Lee's character in Game of Death was attempted to be killed in the movie. So people immediately started putting all of these together and being like, there is a Lee family curse, this demon's out to get him. And then, of course, 2 months later, out comes Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, with that scene in the movie that just further erupted the theories around the demon in Bruce Lee's family.
So this was like years before. So in the 70s, that was their plan to finish the movie.
Yes,
and then
that's how they finished Game of Death.
20 years later, his son gets killed in the same
20
way.
years later, his son gets killed in a very mysterious way.
That does seem a little too coincidental.
It's one of those things where I don't think the curse would carry any weight if Brandon hadn't died. Brandon Lee's death really does put a lot of weight behind it if you believe in like the mythical and you believe in that kind of stuff. If you don't believe in that kind of stuff, then it's all coincidence. But if you
Does
believe
Brandon
in
Lee
mythical,
have any children before he passed away?
He did have children, but I'm not sure. Oh, actually, I don't know if he did have children or not. Now that I think he did for some reason. I feel like he had a son, but I know that he was only engaged. He wasn't married when he died.
So if he has a son and his son, I mean, after the third one, that's pretty crazy if something were to happen.
Yeah, no, that would be pretty nuts. Yeah, no, I don't see. I'm looking at Brandon Lee's thing right now. I'm not seeing any kids, and so I don't think he did have any children. So I guess he would have been the end. That would have been the end of the line for him. But he is also buried in Seattle. Fun fact. So when you guys come out to visit me, we can all go visit Bruce Lee's,
Bruce
and Brandon's graves, which are right next to each other. Okay,
you said Brandon was born in 1965.
I think so. Is that what I said?
Okay. No, so he was just 28 then?
Yeah, so he was, let's see, he was born in 65. Yep, 65. And yeah, and so he was actually some of the people getting the conspiracies, Brandon was actually the exact same age that his mom, Linda, was when Bruce died. So, I mean, you sort of like take that all with a grain of salt, but it's all just kind of
that seems like reaching.
I agree. I saw that note and I was like, and they're like,
it's not a reach for conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
That's just right on the button.
That's what's
we
funny.
Just
the article's
happen to be the same age as the number of days in 3 out of 4 Februaries.
Yeah, basically. Okay, so lastly but not least, and I don't want to take too much more time, but our last area. So we talked about murder, we talked about mythical, and now our last one is accidental. There's basically 3 accidental ways. So Bruce Lee, as I mentioned earlier, he died from like a swollen brain, essentially. And he died in
that
Betty's
like from
apartment.
concussions? Do you know? Does it explain that?
No.
Getting hit in the head too many times?
From what I saw, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. This is basically like the 30-second version of what I saw last night. Was basically at some point several years before Bruce Lee died, he broke his back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember. Do you guys remember how he broke his back?
Well, in the movie, it's from that one dude.
It's not that. Yeah. No, it's not that. I think it was just an accident.
He broke his back. Yeah. So because of that, they thought he would possibly, doctors said he may never walk again. But let alone do more martial arts and act and stuff. But Bruce Lee was determined. He ended up recovering, but he had back pain. So he was always taking painkillers for his back pain. And then that medicine that you couldn't pronounce because it is a really hard word. was like a headache medicine, and it triggered some kind of weird chemical reaction in Bruce Lee that caused his brain to swell because of the allergic reaction or something like that to the combination of the two medicines, and then that's what ended up killing him.
And so that's what's considered to be the official story. So remember I mentioned at the beginning when everyone was accusing Betty and the bomb threats, and the government was like, geez Louise, we've got to do something about this. What they did was they went and did a full autopsy on Bruce Lee, and basically they came to two conclusions. The first one, several doctors said, okay, well, it's about hash. He's been doing marijuana, he ingests this cannabis, traces of hash are found in his stomach, and so that's what caused his death. But there's never been any link between cannabis and this brain swelling. It's called cerebral oedema. That's a swelling of the brain, and it's just your ability to overdose on marijuana is basically non-existent, and so that got ruled out pretty quickly. The second thing was exactly what you just said, Danny. Basically, that this medicine he'd taken had combined weirdly with this medicine he'd been taking for a while, and it basically caused his brain to swell. Now, most people don't believe that. And the reason they don't believe it is because, one, he'd been taking this painkiller many times before. This was not the first time that he had taken this painkiller, so there was no reason that this time the painkiller should have had that reaction. Secondly, when you die basically like that, it's pretty much an allergic reaction, which means that besides the swelling of the brain, he should have had rashes in his mouth and throat and a variety of other symptoms, of which he had none. So basically, people have kind of questioned it, but that painkiller thing has been the official story for Bruce Lee's deaths for, 30 years or whatever, until basically 2 years ago when this book came out by the guy I mentioned earlier, Matthew Polly. Now, Matthew Polly has what I believe to be, in all the ones I read, all these ones we talked about, I believe it's the most accurate and most potential for his death that I think anyway. Now, what it is a few years before, not even a few years, I think it was several months before his death, Bruce Lee underwent an operation to remove sweat glands from his armpits, because basically he didn't like the way when he was fighting that he would have sweat stains there. And since this was before the ability for people to go paint stuff out effects, he didn't want to look like he was all sweaty and gross all the time. So he removed the sweat glands from his armpits so that they would not sweat. Now, what happens though is when you do that.
This is true. This is like proven.
Yeah, no, this is true. He did
Okay.
it. Yeah, that's proven. But what happens is,
antiperspirant back then.
well, I mean, I think the way he's moving, it's like he's beyond antiperspirant. So
Not with right guard.
He's immune.
nice try, Old Spice. That'd be a good commercial. So anyway, because he had removed the sweat glands, it basically not eliminated, but it significantly reduced his body's ability to dissipate heat, right? So he would get hot easy. Now, on May 10th, just a few weeks before his death, he was in a dubbing room recording dialogue for Enter the Dragon, and the engineers had to turn off the air conditioning while he was talking to avoid picking up that noise in the background. And what happened is, while he was in there, he basically like passed out because it was so hot without the air conditioning, and he wasn't able to dissipate out water that he passed. And he was rushed to the hospital, where guess what he almost died from? Swollen brain, cerebral edema. Okay. The doctors diagnosed it and were able to treat it in the nick of the time, but none of them realized that this collapse was from heat stroke. Okay, they just assumed that something had gone on. Okay, so now flash forward 2 weeks later, he's on, what did I say at the start? The hottest day of the year in July. He's been acting, he's been punching and doing scenes, he's worked up, right? He's with his lady Betty, who a lot of articles suggest that he's having sex with. So he is doing everything you can to get physically warm, and he's feeling lightheaded. Now, rather than passing out like he did in the booth, he basically takes some medicine and goes and lies down. And what happens is he has the same heat stroke thing happen, but because he's already asleep, nobody knows. And he lays in there for hours, basically swollen brain, heat stroke, and passes away while he's in there. So he's dead before they even find him. And so this reason that Matthew Polly gives in his book, to me, is about the most solid, because it accounts for the medicine that has been the justified reason for the past 40 years. And it accounts for the fact that nobody killed him or poisoned him. It's a natural thing. And it also accounts for what is one of the other big challenging things is how does this man who's like basically peak physical condition die mysteriously? So I feel like this one, to me, if I was to put a vote down, I would say this is where my money's at on this one. Though honestly, as weird as it is, I think The Curse is probably number 2, just because of Brandon Lee's death and how crazy that is. But again, it depends on where your spiritual beliefs are and all of that.
Yeah.
So crazy.
I mean, honestly, like that part, the story that you just told, as you figured that's the most likely scenario. To me, almost like the weirdest part of that is the removing of the sweat glands. Like, I didn't even know you could do that. Like,
He's super stuck on that. He's
It does feel like
oh, I can't. It's the sweat gland. He moved his sweat glands.
it does feel like such a Michael Jackson thing to do. Like Michael Jackson was always like experimenting with his body to avoid weird things, and it's like I feel like if Bruce Lee had lived by the time he was like in his 50s, he'd be like, dude, that guy is weird. Removed all his sweat glands.
Yeah.
I am going to show you guys here really quickly. Let me pull it up. My virtual background. So I told you guys I was looking for my report, right? That I did in like 7th grade on Bruce Lee. Well, I found it, but I also had done my own cover for it, which I'm now putting up for you all. See, this is the official Bruce Lee portrait I did for the cover, which you can tell is proportionally correct in every way.
It's also
it looks like
of Bruce Lee,
Yeah.
Dragon,
a Bruce Lee story. I can't scroll down, but if you could scroll down, it uses the same tagline from the movie as well, which is pretty sad.
It looks like Liu Kang, though, kind of.
It's because he was the actor in the picture I'm copying this off of. So, like, my report that I submitted to my class about Bruce Lee did not even have Bruce Lee on the cover. So, really
I think as weird as all these conspiracy things are too, and just because we had just done an episode of that, anybody saw or just listened to one of the previous episodes we just did about toys, and Trev Mydell has kept all these toys from when he was a child, and now to find out that he also has kept reports from a child. Like,
not only is it reports, Danny, they are digitally cataloged.
Yeah, they are. I've scanned.
That's
them all
why
in.
he was able to find it so easy.
are you serious? Wow,
He has
that's
cataloged
impressive.
every single written thing that he has done since he was in pretty much junior high.
Yeah, I feel like I have a problem.
Do you
But it
have,
makes it quick to grab
would
things
do
like
it.
this.
I thought I had OCD, but that's good. I should start cataloging all my stuff.
Yeah, you can't even find our freaking sports cards that we collected back in junior high. What are you gonna catalog?
I'm starting now. I'll have everything from when I was 37 on.
I was actually over at my grandpa's house like a month ago, and I was going through his shed because I had some stuff stored in there, and I found like 3 big bins of like, all my high school notebooks and stuff, and like my yearbooks, pictures, and I was like, "That's where all this is." Pretty sweet.
Did you also find bulk, just bags of rubber gloves? Because your grandparents had so many just bulk items.
I feel like right now in this COVID world, your grandparents' house is the best place to be.
I know.
Rubber gloves, cleaning supplies, all just in bulk.
They did buy like basically everything in bulk back when it was like Price Savers, before Costco was even around here, before Price Savers turned into Sam's Club. It was good times. I thought Alan was gonna say that, or Trav was gonna say, "Did you find your internet connection?"
Who?
What?
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
to Alan, like, because Alan's entire sentence before that was like super broken up.
No,
Not on the
no,
weekend.
Daddy, I'm not as clever as you. I don't think of those jokes.
Yeah, on the recording, it wasn't. So you look like
Yeah.
I say
I was gonna say he sounded just fine to me, so I think it might have just been your internet connection.
connection. You find yours, games.
Well, that's embarrassing.
Awesome. Well,
That was cool, though. I mean, as far as was there any more? Sorry, Travis.
Nope, that's it. That's it. Nope, end of the road.
Sweet. I have one kind of overwhelming philosophical question. Out of all of this, because I mean, you did a lot of research on it. I self-admittedly I probably put in like an hour and a half of like watching some YouTube videos, reading some articles and stuff. But then I realized and I remembered, I'm like, throughout my whole life, one thing that I've always seen is Bruce Lee quotes, like everywhere. Like people will make them into like memes or put them in whatever, right? Why is Bruce, and then knowing that he died at such a young age, it just seemed kind of odd, like that Bruce Lee would have so many inspirational quotes. What is your theory?
Like water is the softest thing, yet it can penetrate rock.
That's pretty good. It's probably because he wrote a book, and so when he broke his back, he spent time putting a book together, and so I think it just gave a lot of resource. And honestly, like Trav said, he is. I mean, anyone in that environment is very philosophical or philosophical or whatever you said, but like I think that's
like a
just
breakfast place. Philosophical.
Come have a philosophical, a philosophical waffle.
Things said by Asians in general seem to be more wise.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Is wondering
probably
if
like the racism of America.
If he was just saying stuff, but people thought like, oh, like I literally wrote a note here. It says, "Why was he quoted so heavily throughout his life?" And then in parentheses, I put, "Is it just because when Asians talk, we sound super wise?"
Well,
that's what he wants.
Not all Asians sound super wise, philosophical.
Yes,
so.
Yeah, I would suggest going and I mean, I know you two haven't seen it, so I would go watch Dragon. Again, like you said, there's a lot of inaccuracies with the movie, but it's an amazing movie.
It's a good movie, and it also has like one of the best soundtracks. So
no, I really am gonna seek out that movie. I would also encourage any listeners who have not seen the movie to watch it. Maybe we can have some kind of discussion about it on our social media channels, which we have on Instagram at QCode Podcast, Twitter at QCode Podcast, and Facebook at QCode Podcast. You could also visit us at our website at www.qcodepodcast.com.
It's just QCode Podcasts everywhere.
And also, don't forget
QCode Podcast. See what comes up.
Yeah. You can, don't forget though, we would love to have some more ratings and reviews, especially if you're using iTunes. If you'd go on there, give us a 5-star review, that'd be much appreciated. And if you do so, I will leave you with this one thought. You must be shapeless, formless like water. When you pour water into a cup, it becomes a cup. When you pour water into a bottle, it becomes a bottle. When you pour water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Water can drip and it can crash. Become like water, my friend.
It's crazy because as you said that, my wife filled up water to make some tea. So I feel like conspiracy.
All right, everybody. We will be coming back over the next 3 weeks with 3 other conspiracies. So make sure that you tune in to find out what those are. I would tell you what they are, but I think it'd be a little bit more exciting to come, and find out each week what those are. So I think next week we got Alan's conspiracy. So start brainstorming what you think that could be. And
Space.
Space. So again, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.